This presentation is brought to you by the City of Greensboro's Economic Development and Business Support Office.
And it was as I was with Paul and Howard, I started seeing some of the wheels coming off this construction company. And they started laying off estimators. I thought, God, a construction company laying off estimators, that's not good. So at that time, I started putting my resume together and started looking at some other opportunities. And I looked around, we went out and we interviewed in Alabama and St. Louis and Montgomery, Alabama also. And pretty soon I thought, I would always want to start my own business. Never really knew anything about it. It was a matter of how to do it. So I went out and somebody gave me a start a business book. It was like 25 pages long. And I looked down at that, boy, I can figure this out, 25 pages. Well, the first chapter was you have to have a name. A name for a company. Hadn't thought about that. So then I spent time trying to figure out what would be a name. And I ran across, and I eventually scoured it enough that I came up with HICAPS. And HICAPS is an acronym for Hood, Information, Control, and Planning Systems, and I'm the hood. So think of that when you're going to start your business, you're going to have a name of your company. I would suggest in some ways you want a name that can kind of relate what your business is. If you're selling gadgets or gadgets, and of course HICAPS doesn't tell you anything, but I didn't get that part of the chapter. But you want to get a name for your business, and that was day one. Every business should have a business plan, and as I say up there, it's very important. And why I say it's important is that it is extremely sobering when you go through a business plan exercise. Because the first thing I would suggest you want to do on a business plan is identify all your costs. Do you want to get paid? Do you want to have insurance? Do you want to have a phone? Do you want an office? Do you want a copier? Do you want a computer? Do you want a car? Are you going to have paper? These are all costs. So you start off by identifying, in my opinion, all the costs that you can possibly dream up that you're going to need to start a business. And it can be just mundane things that you don't even think about, but you go through the exercise of what are all the costs that I'm going to be faced on a monthly basis. And it's sobering. You're going to come up there and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to need, and if you're going to put a salary in there, I'm going to need to have $15,000 a month for a cost. Then you get on the other side of the equation, and it's revenue. How are you going to raise $15,000 a month because these are your costs? Then you start having to brainstorm. Well, if I'm selling a gadget and a gadget, and I'm going to sell them with a $5 profit, how many $5 profit gadgets and gadgets that I have to divide into 15,000 to tell me how many I need to sell to break even? You're going, whoa, I gotta be selling these gadgets and gadgets for $50 profit. And maybe I need to go back and look at my 15,000 cost and see if I can get it down to 10,000. So you start going through this process. Know the difference between gross and net revenue and profit. It's easy to say, oh yeah, we went out and we earned, we billed $500,000. But you also got to realize what it was the cost for that $500,000. If the cost was $400,000, you made $100,000. If the cost was $600,000, you're $100,000 in the hole. So I use it as just an example. Understand you're looking at net. Gross, you got to subtract the cost against the revenue, and it'll tell you what your net is. I started going through and saying, okay, well, what could HICAPS do? And I ended up with a business plan. I went up and down South Elm Street. At that time, my office was basically my car. And I went up and down Elm Street. I had this little business plan. And I went in there and knocked on banks. And the banks would let you come in and they would say, well, you know, you don't have any assets. I go, so I'm not asking for it. I just wanted to, will you be my banker? Well, after going up and down Elm Street, I couldn't find one bank that wanted to risk on Dan Hood. And I had a business plan. I had, you know, where my projections were, how I was going to make a living doing this stuff. And I couldn't find one bank who would give me a line of credit back then. So I was, you know, well, that wasn't going to discourage me. So I went up there and luckily I ran into a gentleman named Mike Weaver. Mike Weaver is a big supporter of this university. I think he's been on the board of directors. He's a marvelous individual. And I went in there and got introduced to Mike. And I gave him my story. And he looked at me and he said, I think you probably can make it. And he was my angel investor. So that's how I basically started the business, was with an angel investor. All I wanted was a line of credit that I could go out there and buy a new PC, I could buy a plotter, I could maybe buy a phone, and I could have a little bit of paper to print stuff on. So as you start looking at businesses, you got to start identifying what are all the components you need. Cash is king. Don't ever forget that in small business. Cash is the king. If you outrun your cash, you're out of business. So when I was telling you about this, you know, business plan, and you want to determine your cost, and you want to determine your revenues, and you're going to have so much cash, and you may have 3 months of staying power, 4 months staying power, or you may have a year. But cash is king. If you run out of cash, you're going to be out of business. Just one of those realities of business of all types. So always think about cash. It's a philosophical. I always pay the employees first, then I pay the vendors, then I pay the suppliers, and if there's any money left, then I pay myself. And it's philosophical. It doesn't have to be that way, but I find that's what you know, when you're out there dealing with subcontractors and vendors and you're buying stuff, you don't ever want to string them out, because when a push comes to a shove, they're going to remember that you were a slow payer. So you really want to get in the habit of being a good payer to all the people you want to jump when you need them to. Resources. These are resources that are all out there, and you need them in business. You need to have an accountant. You need somebody to go out there and double check your books and make sure you're paying adequate taxes on a quarterly or monthly or an annual basis. You need a lawyer. A lawyer, you know, we all have lawyer jokes, and we all don't know why we have lawyers many times. But lawyers can really help you. They can get you out of trouble. They can help you avoid trouble. And lawyers have a value because if you potentially, you know, go out and you promise a service to somebody, or you're going to sell them 10 gadgets, and all of a sudden you only delivered 7 gadgets, and who you sold them to comes back to you and says, hey, you caused me, I lost money because you didn't deliver. I'm going to sue you. Well, that's the wrong time to go talk to a lawyer. Now you're in crisis mode. So early on, you want to get a relationship with a lawyer and an accountant and say, okay, here's my business plan, here's my cash flow, this is what I'm doing. Get involved with the community. Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, Lions Club, Kiwanis clubs, professional clubs, networking. That's how you build your network, is to go out and get civically involved with all these groups. It's rewarding because you're giving back to the community. You can join American Red Cross, you can join Goodwill. There's countless organizations you can go out there and meet and get involved and give back. Work on your business and not in your business. This is a hard thing to do. I had trouble with this, and what I mean by this is if you want to grow a business, you can't be working in your business. You have to be working on your business. And I'll use kind of the analogy, and it happened to me. I always kind of use it as being a tar baby. As I would go there and make a sale, and the person would say, okay, now I understand you're going to work on my job. I go, yes, I'm over here. And I'll go to make another sale over here. You're on my job, right? And so pretty soon I'm like this. And I do that 2 more times, and pretty soon I have no capacity to sell anymore. I'm all in my business and not on my business. And I had trouble growing the business early on because I was in it and not on it. We got into doing a lot of medical work, hospital work, because they were time sensitive and there was a lot of moving parts in doing hospital work. Well, we were successful in it, but I never really thought that hospitals and businesses had business cycles. So we ended up getting most all our eggs in one basket. Of course, we only had, I think, 4 of us in the company back then, so it wasn't too hard to get all of us doing in the same job type work. But I learned that even hospitals have down cycles. And all of a sudden, back 24 years ago, there's a downturn in construction of hospitals, and all our workload dried up. And it made me realize that a key point that I would share with you all is you want to get diversified. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. When we started 28 years ago, we were bumping along with 2 people. Actually 1.5. One, I was full, and then I had a part-time person, and he became a full-time person. And now we're up to 50 people. This year we'll do probably over $30 million as a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. Was I smart enough to figure all this out? No. I think I more kind of bumped along and learned from learning a little bit at a time. Have fun, and recreation is recreating free time. Make sure you set aside times to go and relax, enjoy, be it walking, running, biking, playing chess, whatever your passion is. If you don't have that outlet, you are going to be pretty miserable. So I would encourage everybody to seriously think about have fun in your business, and definitely plug in recreation.